Hello everybody, and today I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Noki. Just before I do that, I'm just going to remind you all that this is a free children's fashion information podcast for children anywhere or whoever wants to learn more about fashion, maybe they want to get into the fashion industry, or just wants to listen to people and what they have to say generally. I'm not going to do too much of an introduction for Dr. Noki because he is the most amazing erudite man. He's got lots to say. He's a total maverick, but listen to him, and listen to him really carefully. So hi there, how are you?
Hello, everybody. How are you, Caroline? Nice to be chatting again.
Absolutely. Noki, I'm going to ask you the question that all children want to know before anything, and then I may interject at some points when you're speaking, just give you a question from a child that I think will be relevant of what you're saying at that time. So if that's all right with you.
Very much so.
Done something I really like. We always send the questions to people to so that they have an idea and they can go through and they can find a question they feel is really appropriate, they know they can answer. But Noki has taken another approach, which I totally love, and that is he doesn't want to know any questions. He said he'd overthink them. I think he's exactly right. So this really is Noki off the cuff and totally unfiltered. Right. Okay. So Noki, what is your story? What is your role? How did you get there? And that's the question children all want to know.
I went to art school in 1989. And I finished in...
When you're at school, where were you? Where were you growing up?
Okay, when I was growing up, I was in Aberdeen, in Scotland. I then moved out from Aberdeen to a country village called Ellen, and we used to nickname it Hell on Earth. So we used to put an H in front of Ellen. So it was a small country village with an academy built. So everybody from the area, from the country area, would come in on buses, school buses. And that's how I got to school on a school bus. Then I moved to Edinburgh College of Art in 89, and I finished. Actually, just to give you a bit of a heads up, I got thrown out as well of art school.
Did you?
Yes, I did. And the reason I tell you this is because sometimes some students are very scared of them and how it's going to be, and the intimidation of going to university and all the rest of it. It wasn't I was bad at what I did. I like to say I was quite good at what I did, but I came across authority through a tutor.
Yes.
They can be very intimidating as well. And what I'm trying to say to you is you may come across authority at your art schools and tutors that really don't understand you, that try and block what you've got to say. And this is their problem, not yours. I challenged a tutor for various reasons, and I was told to take a year out to think about authority and who was in control. So I think these moments in my life, bar a few others, which are very extreme, but it's another podcast, made me think about all that, made me look at the idea of control and respect it. I get it, respect it. So I got back in again anyway. But one of the great things was I had to take a year out, and I worked for Benetton, so I could fold T-shirts. And one thing I'm known for is a T-shirt, so I can fold T-shirts on the while standing and talking at the same time. So weird little moments like that gave me expert. But I went back to art school, and I came out. It was very tricky, it was difficult, but I knew I was more of an artist than anything to do with the fashion design. So my remit in the world is to create the perfect collage, and that perfect collage is how I achieve it, is to chop up T-shirts. So my endeavor for the last 25 years is to create the perfect collage, and by cutting up branded T-shirts, I get my imagery from the T-shirt and branded clothing, just like at the turn of the century, there was an art movement called Dadaism, and there's a famous artist called Picasso, and he was one of the first to do collages. Duchamp would meet an artist called Duchamp, and he would create assemblages. So these movements, these collage and assemblages, is how I operate within my creative remit. And that is the idea of creating art apparel.
Brilliant. Did you this may be a little bit when you move on a little bit further on, but this is from AJ. He's a 13-year-old boy, and he says, was there anyone who inspired or supported you, someone like a mentor? It doesn't have to be when you were growing up, and it can be as you came to London and etc.
Growing up, I had my older brother. He was a great style warrior of his time. Wasn't scared of clothing. Wasn't scared of mixing it up within his own style tribe. So I was very into all that. It was very hard being his brother because he was a hard taskmaster, like some brothers can be and sisters can be. But they are who they are, and if you watch and listen, sometimes you'll learn from them. But it wasn't till he was a punk. My cousin was also the punk, so they were living the punk era. And I used to go to the clubs with them, and there was loads of fun and all the rest of it. But it wasn't my era. I was not until 1988 when acid house kicked in. That was the original raves. So that's what gave me the confidence to be my own particular raver, and that's probably why I'm very obsessed by branding, because that era was very much about wearing a Nike and an Adidas t-shirt.
So sorry, I keep butting. I'm so sorry. Could you explain to the children exactly what acid house was? Because children, you're growing up at a time where youth movement is very different to how it was, and this is when I grew up, but especially when Noki grew up. What was rave? What was acid house? What was its impact on children? And
it was the beginnings of repetitive beats created through technology, coming out of the house sounds in Chicago and the American beats that were kicking off. And some say because of the machinery that was going in the car plants, the repetitive banging of metal was an inspiration for some of the guys that worked. So they were kind of like feeding off their environment and taking it back, and then being able to find those repetitive beats within electronic movement in the sampler machines. The acid house movement was a specific kind of like noise that was repetitive, and it just sang to me. I don't know what it was. It was probably the same as the punks got with the drums and the guitars. I was able to dance to it, and I don't know. It's myth and legend, the acid house scene. It's now being just classified as rave now.
Yeah.
But my initial intake of it was definitely acid house. And just punch into Google and put in acid house music, and you will hear a specific kind of sound.
Absolutely.
That was the soundtrack of my 16, 17, sort of 15, 16, 17 sort of like backdrop.
Amazing.
And it was great fun. But like every scene has its consequences. So you have to sort of like, how do I explain that one? But yes, the acid house scene moved on, and it's, it came to a conclusion, to go back to that question. I got to London in 1995, and could I say there was anything? I suppose there was a scene called the Hoback, and it's the House of Beauty and Culture.
Oh yeah.
There's a designer called Christopher Nemeth and Judy Blame and John Moore Shoes. I loved all that because they were basically make, doing, and mending. They were taking old textiles and making new product from them. So yes, that was going on, but at the same time, I was very much into my sportswear. So I was kind of compromised between using kind of having a more holistic kind of aesthetic with being grown up with the high tech of sportswear. And I suppose that's where Noki's come in. So I take the aesthetic of make, do, and mend, and I chop it up, and what's called the mashup. That's what I'm known as, the mashup artist. So I mash up those branded products to make new hybrid products.
Absolutely. And the thing was with, you know, movements like acid house, rave, punk, new romantics, you know, northern soul, everything. It was the music was embracing what people wore. It was a two-way thing, wasn't it? It wasn't just fashion. It wasn't just streetwear. Music was very much entwined into it.
Yes, oh, absolutely. Music, art, and fashion go hand in hand. As I say, you know, sportswear just evolved into acid house because it was such an energetic kind of dance movement. Because you're talking about electronic music and it can go on and on and on. There was no band playing, and the band can only go so long without getting tired out. And you would stop with the band and take a breather, have a pint or whatever, and then get back into the music again. But with electronic music, it was plugged into the system, so it could go on and on and on and on and on. It never stopped. So, you know, with that, you know, came the drink and the drugs and the bad, and I would say the toxic side of that movement, where addiction can. There's the stuff that you've got to navigate as you grow older, and you become part of your tribal scene. So yes, when I sort of, you know, the human endeavor was pushed over by the electronic pulse, I would say, and that's a big shift, including when you rave. You kind of rave on your own. You don't rave with people. You don't dance particularly with people, especially back then. So it'd gone from like the 60s rock and roll, where you definitely dance with a partner. Then the punk scene kicked in, and you kind of danced with people in the mosh pit. But with the rave thing, you kind of went solo, and you just became a solo dancer. So it became very insular, as another thing. But at the same time, you know, sportswear made sense because it was something comfortable to wear. You couldn't wear shoes, you couldn't wear shirts and collars and fashion that we'd grown up with at that time, that had been evolved since the turn of the century with the designers like Coco Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, Christabel, Balenciaga, those kind of people that basically created the modern day brand, pattern cut, genius textiles around bodies. All that kind of fashion just didn't work in the rave. It destroyed. It became destroyed, or just wasn't comfortable. So jeans and sweatshirts, hoodies, all that kind of stuff became in trainers. I mean, trainers, when I first started wearing trainers, it was like you were looked upon as if you were, oh, you're one of those dirty ravers. You know, you were seen as an alien in the street because trainers were for the track field, for the gym, you know.
Yeah.
In fact,
you were sweating shed loads anyway. So
yes,
why the hell would you be wearing
you
know, a Chanel jacket?
Exactly, and leather shoes. Once you'd have those wet marks on this sort of, like, you know, the salt marks just destroyed. So a lot of the 20th century disappeared round about, in the fashion context, disappeared out of obscurity, really. Do you know what I mean? It became null and void. You know, so with that came words, slogans on t-shirts, and the humble t-shirt became the armor of that tribe. The tracksuit top. So a lot of stuff
that were really prevalent when you were young.
For me, I was obsessed with Fila.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with Fila, and I loved, obviously Adidas had been around, and it to come through. You know, you'd see it on and off, and, you know, different eras would wear it. Even the punks would have a go at wearing a bit of Adidas tight top. But for me, it was Fila. I was a bit obsessed with Lacoste. These brands were European as well, so they were exotic. And Nike was the holy grail because it was American, and everything American back in the 80s was holy grail. It was the pinnacle of everything that was going forward. So Yeah, but Fila for some reason captured my imagination. I do enjoy playing around with Fila a lot.
That's so interesting. It really is. I mean, I'm sure for, young people who are the age you were would be really interested in hearing that. So you moved down to London. Why did you move down and what happened?
Well, London being the mecca of creativity, I had to make that move. So I moved up to an empty Shoreditch in 1995
Yeah,
to a warehouse, and I lived in one of those warehouse sort of
yeah,
in Shoreditch. I mean, literally, if you get taken there by your mum and dad, you'll see Shoreditch as a thriving kind of
yeah.
pulsating like mecca of modernity now. Was beforehand when I first moved in '95, it was like a thoroughfare. There was
It was,
nothing.
yeah, I just remember it was totally off my radar. And then having to, going over there for things, and then suddenly thinking, oh my God, this is really exciting. And that was
Yeah.
in the, early 90s, I suppose. Yeah, yeah,
So it was a I mean, there wasn't even a pub open at the weekend for us. So I I instigated with a DJ called Fida Ran, the high priestess we called her,
yeah.
and she DJed and I managed the bar with Ray for a woman called Vicky Bengelli, and the bar was called the Bricklayer's Arms, and that allowed our God, there was probably about maybe 30 people that lived in warehouses around that area. I mean,
Yeah.
that was about it. The community was small, but 30 people in one pub with no restrictions on evenings, so you could do late night drinking.
Yes.
you know, the, there was no restrictions whatsoever. So it was like a rave utopia. It was great fun, but it has its consequences, like everything else does. And
How old were
it,
you then? How
I
old?
was I was in my 23, 24, 25 era,
Brilliant.
and I just left art school and moved there, and started running the first rave bar called the Bricklayer's Arms in Shoreditch, and it became huge,
Mm.
massively popular. And if I was to explain, going back to that question that Ryan had,
It was AJ, yeah. But who inspired you? Was there
age,
something that supported you
it was,
like mental?
if it was to explain that question, what inspired was more the environment
Yes.
rather than some specific person. So it was kind of like watching what was going on, the politics, how my friends were acting, my own personal behavior.
Mhm.
Um, Things like that informed me. So what I saw as after opening that pub was that pub becoming far too busy, the rave scene kicking off, it becoming far too toxic with the
Yeah.
drink and the drugs. The
Mhm.
behavior was becoming very obnoxious.
Yeah.
I was managing it, so I felt like I was facilitating it. I was becoming a bit depressed about it because
Mm.
there's nothing I could do about it. Because I would come across like the boring person, but which we all worry about. I don't want to be boring, but at the same time, somewhere in that little thought process of being boring is your own personal self talking to you
Absolutely.
about
Yes. I
the
think that's
situation.
sorry, I butted in. I think that's such a good point, Noki, because I think children listen to this, what you may see as boring. I butted in. Would you mind just saying that again, just so that the children can hear it clearly?
No, well, it's more to do with like that thing of like instead of being caught up with celebrity and their life, it's like how's your life
Mm.
going? So if you feel like you're not enjoying something or you're not enjoying somebody's attitude or personality at the time, or you're being oppressed or bullied, why, if and but, and just maneuver yourself away from it. Don't go with the flow. Don't let the bully get even more oppressive on you.
Mm.
Become much more proactive for yourself and maneuver yourself away from it. So when I talk about, as the art known as the mashup artist, that's what I was in. I was in a horrendous rave mashup. Everything was really quite toxic. So instead of getting negative about it, I started chopping up the thing that was most dear to me, which associated to the rave, and that was my branded t-shirts and my uniform, my rave uniform that I would be wearing. So I kind of that's when I took my frustration, my anger, my disappointment, my disillusionment, all these kind of things, took it out by chopping up, and made myself happier by making a Nike, Adidas and Fila tracksuit. And there was not such a thing back then. There still isn't such a thing back then. The only people that can make them are you. You don't need permission from those companies to make those tracksuits. You can chop up 3 tracksuits and make one by sewing them together with the techniques that Caroline School is showing you. And you can make those hybrid pieces, called street couture or art apparel. You can make your own versions. And that's how I navigated my way out of that depressive time, because I suppose the people that were turning up at the pub were just wearing Nike or Adidas or Fila, but they maybe wear a top, but none of them wore them joined together. None of them wore them so they were actually attached to each other. They were all separate pieces. So I wanted to, I suppose, be more creative within the mashup. I could see it going on. I went, right, okay, you lot, if you're all being this badly behaved, then I'm going to get you more badly behaved, but not in a fighting way, not in an angry way, but in a really creative way.
Absolutely. And it's very true, isn't it, that time people actually, like you say, you love Fila and you had your Adidas, had your Nike and all the rest, but if you had chopped up your t-shirts and mashed them together at that point, that was a very big thing to do, because people worshipped the brand, didn't they? And so what you were saying, I mean, is enormous, and it definitely was at that time.
Everybody thought I was losing the plot. So that wasn't. I knew I wasn't, because I knew I was being creative and maneuvering myself away from the depression that was surrounding me at the time. And everybody was so fixated on this Adidas t-shirt that I cut up, or this Nike t-shirt that I used to look, but you looked really great in it.
Yeah.
And there's thousands of other t-shirts I can look really great in. Why are you fixating on this one branded product? And I thought, wow, the world is full of thousands and millions of branded t-shirts. And I thought, there's my way out, because I've now got a fresh energy flow into those thousands and thousands of leftovers. And 25 years later, now we have sustainability, which is luckily, which is the new buzzword from recycling, and, I call my pieces up fusions, not, upcycling. So I've kind of evolved my own language in that 25 years. So I use words like art apparel, up fusion, custom building, street couture, to elevate fashion and creativity, not be putting it into the recycling bin or the wordiness of upcycling and all that kind of stuff, because I find these words are more unhelpful as a brand ident. Oh, it's up fusion. Oh, it's up fusion. It's up fusion. So it's upcycling. It's upcycling. It's like, so what if it comes from a second hand? It doesn't have to be branded.
And you are always one ahead.
Say again?
You're always one ahead, because the way you're thinking, I think that, let's look at it all, everybody. At what point are we going to, recycling, customizing, as we move forward? Surely those terms will be redundant, because it will be so entrenched in the core of what we're doing, as young creative, well, not me obviously, but as young creatives. So the reason why I went quiet for a second, for those of you doing the audio, is that I'm absolutely blessed, because Dr. Noki has changed his outfit. Those of you who are lucky enough, he's very kindly allowed me to use the visual, the actual video. So obviously we'll only be able to show that at the moment to children who are at our school, but I think it will help explain things even further. Yeah, but you're telling me that, you're so right. I mean, and it's also been messed around with, and it's like when vintage was adopted. You know what I mean? That word vintage. And all of a sudden you had brands pretending to do vintage, which was not the point at all. And I think you're so sharp that you see that, no, we have to bring in a new terminology that's personal to you of what you're
Yes.
doing.
Well, it's important because a lot of words become part of meme factories to support industries,
Yes.
and you become the fodder for those meme factories, and you start believing in those words. Where, you know, customization is an old word used by many creatives over the years, where they have just taking commodity, i.e. I always go back to, you know, the customization of cars. So you would go to the scrapyard and you would cut up loads of different cars to make one great looking car, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how I see my work, as I go to the secondhand sort of boutique shop, whatever, rag yard, and the clothing coming in is the car parts. And then I start chopping up those pieces, mash up, you know, get mash up on them, and chop a sleeve off here, a pocket out of there, a neckline from here, and I'll make one fresh piece out of it. So it's a similar context. I mean, somewhere along the line, stop seeing clothes as clothes and just as commodity textile, and what you can do with that textile, and departmentalize a garment. So it's got a zip front, it's got a sleeve detail, it's got a pocket, it's got a pleat. You know, what little bits in that garment can you see removed, and where would you cut around it to remove it, to then place it into another garment to celebrate it.
Mm.
And that's what I'm trying to convey about up fusion. Do you know what I mean? So it's the kind of fusion of different garments in a positive way.
Yeah.
The idea of, you know, they call it upcycling. This recycling thing, it just always makes it sound too worthy. It
Yeah.
always makes it sound too just 20th century kind of like hippie. And I'm not against hippies, but that's a saying, you know, we grew up with, being too hippie, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
being braver, there's one thing I was never really was a hippie, you know. I mean, I get conscious feeling, and more so now. I get the idea of consciousness, you know what I mean? And back in the rave days, you had De La Soul doing conscious hip hop, you know what I mean? And there was a whole scene around that, because even the hip hop scene went through a sort of mashup of disgusting sort of proportions of money and wealth and bitch and power and, you
Yeah.
know, prostitution and all that kind of stuff. And it was being celebrated far too much with guns and all that kind of stuff. And so look into De La Soul and the whole conscious hip hop scene, you know, that might calm down some of your minds. Do you know what I mean? That yes, you're being subjected to too much drill right now and expected to like an awful lot of violent commentary coming through modern music, because the beats are very seductive. So just don't expect to make yourself better unless you look for a better way forward.
Good point.
If you keep listening to the things that you don't like, then expect to get worse. You know, you have,
Yes. Really
you
great.
know, it's, if you keep liking the thing you don't like, expect to get worse, you know. Unlike things, just don't get involved, you know.
Yeah.
Think about why you don't like them, write it down, you know. Remove yourself from celebrity want and need.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean? And realize that a lot of that is very much a toxic kind of affair between you and the visual content to sell you something. And generally it's not a very healthy environment for you to allow yourself to be caught up in,
I think
because there is out there's so much choice out there. But for it to be polarized onto a famous person's body for
yeah.
you to desire is a very weak option to all the choice that's out there.
I think that is such an important point. And children, we see the world that you grow up in, and we see that that's a very typical way forward for you to understand that you only contextualize it if it's on a celebrity. but
Yes.
listen carefully to what Noki is telling you, not telling you, but just opening up your world.
I'm only advising. Yes, Caroline,
Yeah,
I'm only.
I think you're opening up their minds. Sorry, I used the wrong word. I know I did. I'm sorry.
The brain is huge, is a universe in itself. We don't use half of what our brain allows us to, because of our own personal inability to open up the areas that are available to us.
And you created your own opportunity. That's why you became who you are, because of doing that. And when you're in London, once you got to this point where you were chopping up t-shirts, you've seen a lot of negativity, and you were moving forward. At what point did you make your next not opportunity, but because you are a self-made man completely, right? So what happened to you once you started cutting up your t-shirts?
Once I'd got the conveyor belt that I ended up creating for myself, and I call it a conveyor belt because you can't be a solo artist all the way. You need a lot of help, you know what I mean? And thank you so much to everybody that has helped me along my way, you know what I mean? To the stylists, to photographers, to family members, to friends, I just knew that if I just kept going to the second-hand rail, I call it there's another one I call it the second life rail, because every time I customize it, it goes third life, fourth life, fifth life. It's trying to keep something positive. Because again, like second hand, with just to reiterate, the second hand and the recycling, it all sounds very dirty. It always reminds me of smell, or something just uncleansed or used, or you're kind of cheap or poor.
Yes.
And I've never in my entire life gone to the Second Life store and felt poor. I've always come out elevated and really rich, because I've gone to the rave and I was going, wow, where did you find that? Or where did you get this from? And that never ever computed that I was poor or unfashionable, or that kind of idea of being dumbed down, because I couldn't afford to go to the mega store and buy the brand new product with the bag and the tissue paper and all that kind of stuff, and walk out down the high street letting everybody know that I'd been shopping at the flagship store. I'd go to the Second Life store and find my own version and by hunter gathering that way. So yeah, it's kind of it's a state of mind you have to get into, and I find it's a very difficult one for you, because going back to what you mentioned, Caroline, the vintage thing, a lot of brands have just jumped on secondhand clothing and remanufactured them. So when you are growing up with just nostalgia on a rail, not modernity, not modern clothing, and it's sold very cheaply to you, and it's just a tea dress here, it's a 90s tracksuit there, an 80s shoe here, a skinhead type t-shirt there, you know what I mean? It's like, this is just all nostalgia. And fashion does not work around nostalgia. So fashion must be futuristic, it must be pushing boundaries, it must be evolving with its times.
And that for children to hear.
And that for me, the only way I can express to you through the custom build, or to create your own street couture and venture into art apparel, is to chop up that nostalgia that's been given to you, that's hanging in the Second Life store, and chop it up and take a little bit of that nostalgia away and add it to another bit of nostalgia to make something modern, because what you've done there is broken that nostalgic garment, so it'll never hang on that rail ever again. So you've broken into an energy that's been a manufactured energy that you, as a consumer, more so than ever now, that's what we are, just we consume what's given to us with very little independent thought process, because it's marketeered in a very exciting way. Why would you want to think it's when it's on a celebrity, when it's attached to a fancy car, or it's a football team, or this kind of thing? It's like the fantasies constantly being given to you.
Yeah. It's really dangerous. It's really dangerous the way it molds children, teenagers' minds, vulnerable children. You know, like it's so damaging, I think, to give this kind of like image to children that they think that's what it has to be worthy or something.
Yeah,
But when you're in London, sorry to butt in, when you're in London, then you got involved with Fashion East, didn't you?
yes, I mean, I was involved in Shoreditch, and I was very immersed in the graffiti art scene in Shoreditch. So when you're surrounded by that kind of environment with real graffiti artists, when you're talking people that do metal, they do trains, you know what I mean, and they're breaking into yards and doing that kind of stuff, and they come back to the pub and they're talking about it. Something I would never done, but sitting there listening to my mates talking about it. Going back to that question, who influenced you? So I was influenced by those conversations, because it was something, another world I would never in a million years. And you'd see a quick photograph, which would have been back then, not on your phone, it would have just been done on a snappy snap, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So and they had to watch when they got snappy snaps, as in a physical, because those people would sometimes tell the police that these guys are, you know, so there was a lot of dark, kind of like sneaky, kind of like tribalism,
Yes.
you know, within that kind of conversations. And this was like really intoxicating. And I was like, you know, and I'd grown up with the 80s scene of the graffiti and all this, of the trains being done. But when you're actually physically in it and surrounded by the scene, I thought, how can I emulate? How can I do my own version of this? And my one was to tag Noki onto clothing, because I thought to myself, well, we are a bit like trains. We're a bit like walls. So if I tag and graffiti on the garment, I can actually go further than the train station, and my tag can go through the door in the wall into clubs and bars and bedrooms and, you know, places further than the train can go, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so how I evolved, how I felt comfortable tagging over the brand, because I knew it was antagonizing everybody, because it's like,
Yeah.
no, leave it out. I just want a plain t-shirt with Adidas on it, not with Noki written on it. So I was like doing that thing. So the train, the plain t-shirt had become the corporate train that the government and the local people were all like, no, don't,
Yes.
graffiti is a bad thing, you know. That, so I'd become the bad person with my positive tag over the top. And I had that confidence because I was living in that environment.
Yeah.
Because they understood where I was coming from. You know, those guys were like, you know what, actually, yes, that makes sense. That's really full on, because but don't you dare tag my t-shirt, you know what I mean? And that kind of stuff. So I knew I'd got them running.
Yes.
Like they were antagonizing the train depot, you know, and the DLR. So it was like, there's your hypocrisy. Do you know what I mean? So you want to be the bad boy, but you won't let this bad boy, you know, graffiti you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So that you
well,
can.
everybody has a boundary, don't they?
Yeah,
And yeah.
that's it. I knew I had found new boundaries. That's exactly it, Caroline. I had felt and you can only get there by being confident in yourself. And that's when it goes back to a question I was saying, where you dislike and you start saying no, and you just start understanding your own boundaries.
I think that's really good. I've got a question here actually that I think is probably a good time to put into this, and that is it is by Anonymous, of course, and it says I'm so shy. You're talking about your confidence, but she's saying, I'm so shy. I'm a bit of a loner. Well, I don't know if it's a girl, it could be a boy. A bit of a loner, and I know networking is important. What can I do? Now, they're only 13, and Noki has changed again and looks even more resplendent. So there you go. What advice could you give to somebody who is very, very shy, or maybe they just haven't assembled confidence yet? What would you say to them if they're about 13?
I would read books. I would go for long walks. I would find yourself, don't isolate yourself.
Yes.
Be curious. Watch from afar. Don't get too close to things, because it'll make you self-conscious. But look into the far distance and see what you can see, and be curious about what's in the the horizon,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then you'll slowly start to move towards it. And then you'll find your boundaries of how close you want to get to it. And then the person, the thing, whatever you're looking at, will either let you in or it won't. But at least you've been curious and understood and write about it. Always write. Diaries or notebooks or whatever journals, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, you will evolve as a 13-year-old. You will evolve anyway. So I think, so many of us were very shy at that age. So I think, listen carefully to what Noki's telling you, because it's so true. Be curious, observe.
Observe, curious, and just and be aware that you're being shy.
Yeah.
And once you're aware of it, once you're aware, you can repair. When you're not aware, you live in despair.
This is another profundity. You're at it again. He's at it again. He just comes out with these things. I think, oh, no, wow.
I have been you.
Yeah.
I was a very badly bullied child at school. I went through purgatory at school, and I had to come to terms with loneliness. I make friends with it. They were my new friends. Loneliness, insecurity, paranoia. These became I became aware that that's what I was becoming, because
and that was without social media.
Well, the bullies would destroy my friends, you know what I mean? So they couldn't come anywhere near me, because they would get bullied as well. Because I'm a gay man, so that's why I was coming out at school. And luckily you've now got it to sin to watch, so you can. I was outed at school at the age of 14.
Yeah.
So that happened because a very famous actor was diagnosed having HIV, and he was outed, and he was called Rock Hudson. So my name, JJ Hudson, by association, became that person. I became the same as him, gay, but with AIDS. So I was ostracized as soon as I got on the school bus that day, nobody would sit anywhere near me. So there was I was completely and utterly left devoid. I couldn't speak to my parents about it. Nothing could happen, nothing. I just, again, like your loneliness, I was jammed, absolutely jammed with fear.
Yeah.
I was scared to cough. I was looking for lesions on my skin. So these are hardcore, but I'm trying to say to you, out of it all, I got three things: truth, lies, humor. Okay? So the truth was, yes, oh my God, you've outed me. So that saves a whole heap of things. So now I'm out. The lies, I didn't have AIDS. I was not dying. And the humor was, if another kid had been called Hudson, I'd have probably joined in, because that's what kids do.
Okay.
It's dark.
Yes.
So even though you're being bullied and you're in the worst, you've got big ears, like I had big ears, so I was Dumbo, I was Mickey Mouse, I was, I was all called all sorts,
Yeah.
It's just, sometimes you used to think, okay, they're bullying me, they're causing me pain, but the attention's on you for some reason. They have picked on you for some reason. It's not negative. It can come across as negative, but I guarantee in the future, you will celebrate that attention, because it hardened you up. It will definitely harden you up to the knocks and the bumps and the dark grinds that come to you in life.
Yeah. I mean, you've just answered another question by PG, who was 14, and he says, is anyone gay like me? Can they share their story? So thank you for sharing that with the children. That's been really helpful.
I mean, to be gay is okay. It's absolutely okay. And it's not special. It's just exactly the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So don't think it's anything more special than being straight, bisexual, transgender. It's just a human thing that happens. And it's just normal. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a completely normal thing.
I'm going to move you along a little bit. I hope you don't mind, but if you could just sort of go to the point of where you met Lulu Kennedy and Fashionista and what that was.
Yes. Okay, so Lulu Kennedy from Fashionista, I'd known, and we were known each other before I was Noki and before she was Lulu Kennedy, that kind of thing. I was just evolving Noki, and it was quite, she knew me as doing my thing. And she'd gone on to do Fashionista and toured it around London. And she wanted to take it back to the East where it started off, because she'd grown up in the mashup scenes. I mean, she was there, you know. So she understood where I was coming from. She understood why I called my art movement the mashup. And she asked me to do one of my installations for Fashionista. I was very reticent. I was like, I'm not a fashion designer. I don't want to be entering that kind of arena. She went, look, it would be, you are Shoreditch. You're, you know, I was known as the king of customization, the Prince of Shoreditch, whatever, that kind of stuff. I was nicknamed all these, you know, it was more branding. What I'm trying to say, more branding came along, you know what I mean? It's very weird, you know? It's kind of like positive bullying. It's weird. And so she wanted that essence. She wanted to make a big splash back east at the Truman Brewery. And she asked me, and then I was thinking, okay, so what is this thing I'm going to do? And I said, well, I suppose I'm doing a fantasy fashion house. You know, I'm taking the place, you know, it's sustainability, using sustainable textiles. And Noki, Noki House of Sustainability. So that's where the NHS evolved from. And it was just basically an idea of presenting my art apparel in a glamorous kind of context into a superhighway Vogue intensity at the time.
And it got that up. Can they look up your show? Is it on, you know, is it still on YouTube somewhere and all the rest? Are you
yeah, I could. There's a really great one by a great artist called Mark LeBon.
Oh yes. Yeah.
And I'll send you the link. And it's on a website he's got called Doobie Doo.
Right.
And I'll send you that. It's a big long link. My show is in the middle of it because he did a day, one of his crazy films where he filmed himself during the whole day, and right in the middle of that day, he filmed my show.
Great.
In the basketball court. So yeah, that is the 2009 show. It's the best one that I can say where you get the idea of couture, street couture, because the parodying of the shapes and forms. When you look at it, there's no audience, it's just rails of clothing. And the idea was that the rails of clothing were the audience, and they were all screaming to be customized.
Yeah.
So as the models went past, because we all go to fashion shows and we'll go, oh, I want that, I want this, I want that, I want that, you know, I could look great in that. So I wanted to transfer that energy into the rails. So the rails became the audience. And as I say, I wanted that energy or that visual context to be that the clothing were going, oh, I want to be customized. I want my nostalgia broken. I want to be broken. I mean, and reinvented. I want to be street couture, you know. So it was the idea of the clothing becoming the energy, because it's up to you as our new youth movement, because, you know, to create your own youth movement for 2020, not wear the nostalgic past. So I know you're going through one right now, which is the 90s rave. Now, that's really strange because that's what I grew up in, you know, and that's the one I'm trying to fight right now, was my addiction to 90s sportswear. And that's the trend that you're being driven into right now through algorithms, is I can encourage you to chop up those nostalgic garments.
I think it's a really exciting time, isn't it? It's, you know,
it's a perfect time. Because the thing is, my whole thing is like, you know, you can do this in your bedroom. It doesn't need to be in some fancy atelier. You can customize, hand sew. And I think people say to me, but it looks a bit raw. And I think, good.
Yes,
good. It needs
absolutely. Yeah.
It can to be more raw, as long as you've chopped up 3 garments and put them into one. And it doesn't matter how, whether you gaffitate them together, whether you hand stitch them together, you know, whether you safety pin them or you staple them, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the fact you've broken your parents' nostalgia. You know, your parents' friends are the designers feeding you this crap. You know what I mean? That's the basic crutch of it all.
I suppose not all parents have friends who are designers, though.
Yes.
Looking on a wider scale.
What I'm trying to say is that we are feeding you what you think you want. what I'm trying to say to you is, I know it's not what you want because you want modernity.
Mm.
So chop up what you're being given and be you as a fight and a resistance against it.
I think it's a really good way. You know, we all find our own identity of things. And if you are in your bedroom, miles away from anything, all the rest, you know, you just got what you have around you and you try and assemble something. We're talking about garments because we're the fashion school, but you know, to create your own identity through being creative with what you have.
Yes, absolutely. And I truly believe to engage with the algorithm of is the only way that you can start to communicate
Yeah.
with your own friends group. Why did you do this? Why does that say that? Why are you walking about looking like that? Because I want to, because
Yeah.
I decided to. I
George,
decided to make this.
I'm so sorry, I'm butting in again. I've got a question from Georgia, and she's 11, and I think you can answer this quite well with one of your profundities. And this is, have you
Yes.
made any mistakes?
Oh my God. Wait, there is no,
You go say it
there
quickly.
is, I have a saying. So it's, there are no mistakes in Noki, only points of reference. So what I mean by that is, right, you take your garment and you cut into it, and you may have cut in too far or too low, but tough, you cut into it.
Yeah.
So you adapt your movement and you pleat it, or you ruche it, or you adapt the other bit that you've got to cut to fit it. So no mistakes in Noki, only points of reference. And that is the only way, it's the only way that I could get through the day with my own practice so that I didn't disappoint myself.
Yeah.
I would find it, I wouldn't be, because obviously if you get a really great Nike tracksuit or Adidas tracksuit, as soon as you stuck the scissors in, it's gone.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as it was before. So you've got to go with the flow and you've got to be confident, you know. So I'd only be like, okay, no mistakes, no only the fact I'm doing this is the modernity in my work. And I would just cut into it and then attach it to something else. So yes, I have positivity behind that negativity. Yes, no mistakes in Noki, only points of reference.
Absolutely. And also, you know, I think it's good for you to analyze, what do you consider a mistake? Why do you think it's a mistake? How can you, you know, go beyond what you perceive as a mistake and to find out actually it wasn't a mistake, it was just an important part of your journey. So
Well, that's,
yeah.
as an artist, that's why I say I'm an artist,
Yeah.
because I want my mistakes to be my positive way forward, my own personal critique. I want to. The idea of chasing the audience is the problem of the world now. Once you chase the audience, you forget why you're doing it in the first place. So
yeah,
yes, it's lovely to hear an applause or to, you know, hear a positive critique, but always look for how you can improve. You know, as much as they're clapping, critique yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And because then you go back to your cutting room or your studio and you improve on your work, and then the applause will get harder and more profound. Then once you feel like you've come to a conclusion with a certain idea, only then maybe absorb that audience participation in your life. But
yeah.
do not chase it, and do not steal other people's ideas. That's the worst thing you can do.
Yes. Yeah. I know. And I think quite often children end up doing that because they think that they have to copy what is there to be accepted, which is not the case, because at all, it's quite different, and nobody is interested in seeing what you've basically copied as what. And I know why you're doing it, and it's not because you're lazy and you think, oh, just copy. It's a lack of confidence. But listen, you're going to get nowhere by doing that. I've got another question for you here, and it kind of brings about, I know we were talking about Noki's starting up a shop. Yeah. So the question is, how can I use social media as a platform to show my creativity? Have you got any do's and don'ts? I'm Chloe, I'm 14.
Hello, Chloe. I'm a total technophobe, so I'm very like much more like probably why I'm quite good at what I do, because it's much more physical and hands-on. But I'm working with a web guy, and he's basically just slotting in 25 years of physical work into a web shop portfolio platform. It's exciting. It's not something I'm that bothered about. I love TV, but for some reason, I'm not that keen on surfing the net. It's not something. Recently got into more Instagram stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm that person that's staring into the forecourt. You know, like looking. Maybe I've become a bit of a hermit, and I'm looking into the horizons for new things.
Yeah.
So I've had to come back and realize with lockdown, if I want to carry on with my practice, you know, because the physicality of the shop or the boutique is kind of dying now. So I've got to start getting my work to other places. And I have to engage with modernity a lot more than, as much as people say my work is very modernist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not particularly modernist myself with lieu to technology.
Mm-hmm.
Being a dyslexic, I find it quite hard. All the functions and the buttons you've got to press and the areas within the screen that you've got to remember, find it very frustrating. But
and being dyslexic is such a common thing within creativity, isn't it? It's
huge. It's definitely my power. It's definitely my power. It's not a problem.
It's your superpower, isn't it? I always think, you know, you have a different way of looking at things. You know, it's so if you're young and you're dyslexic, don't think, you know, it's a problem. Not necessarily, and certainly not as you move on into life and you know where you are in your own identity. Yeah.
Well, they know about it now. You know, they understand that there are people out there that are dyslexic. So, and it's just an inability to understand words as with their meanings and how to assimilate them together to create sentences and understand sort of like, I'm also quite number dyslexic. I'm dreadful with left and right. I cannot left and right. You know, left, right. So I dread that. That's a real problem. I am saying left when I mean right, and I'm convinced it's right and it's not, it's left, and stuff like that. So yeah, which can be a problem. That's why I don't drive because you know, I cycle everywhere. So
Yeah.
but there's, you know, it's, I suppose, you know, you can you just have to adapt to who you are. But coming back to the question of the website, yes, I've decided to do nokishop.com.
Brilliant.
And I've just kept it nokishop.com. Something simple, and within that platform will be my portfolio. There will be the art. There will be a shop to buy the art apparel. It'll give you an overall view. I will probably change it every month or 2 months. I was putting new things up, and it'll have an education section. So this podcast will probably feature in it as well. So it's just a way of, I suppose, it's creating my own Instagram account within the realms of a www.com. So I'm looking forward to it. And as I say, I've got 25 years of portfolio of quite I hope if you look at it, it's inspiring that you can just take an old t-shirt and get it in the pages of a magazine worn by Giselle. You know,
which is what happened to you. Yeah, I mean, you know, very much part of that 90s ID type sort of setup thing.
Don't get me wrong when I talk about that as a celebrity. I mean, the fact that something broken is worn on the back of the unbroken. You know, and that's why I'm talking. So it's elevated. You know, so I'm going back to the conversation about the Dr. Noki's NHS. I decided now we're going through the pandemic and all the rest of it, to evolve that platform idea. So it's now going to be called Dr. Noki's Nest, and it's going to be, so it's now called Dr. Noki's Nest, and it's just with a simple T put at the end, so it's NHST, so that I can evolve it. And it's also called Dr. Noki's Sustained Textiles. So I've sort of like moved on from sustainability, because that again is becoming a word now highly commercialized.
Yes,
And
absolutely, and used incorrectly as well. Yeah.
And Caroline, you're absolutely right. And I want to distance myself from incorrect behavior, because when I started it in 2008, the word sustainability wasn't hardly even used. In fact, there wasn't even really a movement, so it felt very comfortable and very modern to use the word sustainability then.
Yeah.
So it's become a car advert now. It's become,
yes, it's lost its meaning, it's lost its power. Yeah.
It's losing its power, but it has its, I think it's gaining a commercial power, but it's losing its kind of underground, or I call it the thunderground power, So that's why I've called it, I've moved on, and it's now going to be sustained textiles. And if you look up the word sustained, it's about elevation, keeping up, up fusion. So that's kind of rather than abandoning my ideas, I've evolved my ideas, so it's now Dr. Noki's Nest.
Of course, and that's that's a natural journey, isn't it? Children, I think it's worth just thinking as well, when you talk about are you sustainable, and we think about what in our purchasing power, our heating and things like that, but actually, what about you? Are you sustainable? Are you working in or living or learning in a way that you will be able to keep that up as part of your life? Or are you doing something in your life that isn't sustainable to you? Like maybe it's your behavior. So it's not just, sustainability is not just about what you buy, how much electricity you use, if you're doing this, doing that. It's also about you and your own behavior. Are you doing sustainable behavior? Are you doing something in your life that is making you not sustainable? And as I say, by really negative behavior, depressive thinking, things like that. So sustainability can mean a lot more than you think, and you just bring it back to yourself. Noki has just got another amazing for those of you who
Alan, what you've just said, exactly how I feel about the word sustainability. It's like you have to engage with it as a mentality.
Yes.
So yes, that's when I've come back to the other question about disliking things, not engaging with behavior that you don't find good for you. Just because it's good for other people doesn't mean to say you've got to absorb how they're dealing with their positivity towards something you feel isn't good for you.
Yeah. Which
leads me confident.
Sorry, carry on. Sorry, I butted in.
No, it's just you've got to find your own integrity. And I know it's a really boring thing, but there's a thing called a dictionary. Look up words. Yeah. Going back to that other girl's question, she feels very lonely and very shy. So open up your mind and your imagination by looking in the dictionary, and you'll get some words, and they will give you a landscape that will be your friend.
Absolutely.
And it will give you ideas, and I can't believe I'm saying this, because my grandmother used to say to me about reading the dictionary, and if you couldn't spell a word, you should never use it. Now, so she would always go, spell it, and would degrade me. Because being dyslexic, of course, that just made it worse, because I couldn't.
Absolutely.
So what she was actually saying very true. Was very, very true. We do need to understand words a lot more.
Absolutely.
And their meaning, what they can give, they can enhance.
There's an issue, isn't there, for children, because the way that their curriculum goes, they follow that. Basically, you're taught to pass an exam now, and it's sometimes very hard for you to understand personal research that may not get you anywhere. Do you know what I mean? You may just find you've been researching, looking into books, and but you don't have to have a validation at the end of it. Research, the whole point of experimentation and research is exactly that. You don't know where it's going to take you. You don't know what's going to happen, and you're certainly not going to get a mark at the end of it because it's a personal thing for you, which is great because it's so freeing. I know I read an article on the Sunday Times this week, and it was about something I feel really strongly that children shouldn't be assessed in their creative studies, and in fact I have a lot of thoughts about assessment anyway, and that's the mother of a daughter who still likes to take exams, and she's in her 30s. And they were saying that rather than, you know, exams and coming out with your GCSEs or whatever, that you create a personal portfolio. So, and this has been adopted, and it's, you know, this isn't just some fanciful thought. There are schools from St Thomas's in Battersea, which is an independent school, very famous one, to some really fantastic comprehensive. One was up in the East Midlands somewhere, I forget. But the idea is so that children would have a portfolio, not necessarily a visual portfolio, and not like a straightforward CV, but about them, about what they're good at, what they're bad at, about, you know, not even what they're bad at, I would say, just to celebrate, you know, who they are, so that people can, you know, I just think for me that seems such a healthier way. I know it's.
I definitely agree with you. I think it's something, and within that, I'd love to have a section where they picked 5 words from the dictionary that excited them and what motivated their minds to think.
Fantastic.
So that you get an idea of the kind of potential is in that child's mind,
the
young person's mind. It's because we live in slogan world, you know, so because we do live in slogan worlds, but these words are printed on a t-shirt and they go straight back to a corporate back pocket. And with that comes slave labor and oceans full of plastic and celebrity endorsement and negative. Do you know what I mean? But we are a human race walking about with endorsing and becoming part of a systemic, I love the word systemic, behavior that endorses it 24/7. So that's something that your generation need to realize, is that you are being subjected to explosions of words that go no further than the back pocket of a businessman. And if you're happy with that, that's fine.
Exactly.
But I know that thousands and thousands of kids that are not happy with that, but they don't even know that that's what they're unhappy about.
No, I agree.
They're too busy trying to be like their mates and going to JD Sports to buy a pack of 10 t-shirts for $5. And it's a day out shopping with mum and dad. You know, it's that kind of problem. If you're a true creative, be aware so that you don't live in despair, you know, because if you're not feeling comfortable about it, then there's a reason for that. You're not comfortable, so you need to figure out why you're not comfortable. And it's not the same as, you know, and that includes smashing up your bedroom and, you know, that kind of behavior, you know, attacking your parents, you know what I mean? That's not a way forward.
No,
you know?
not at all. And I just think it's a really important point that, you know, that you're, you know, about ownership of your own behavior, ownership of what you wear. It's very
responsibility.
It's very easy to say how, you know, oh, I support this, I don't like, you know, slave labor, but do look in your own wardrobes and think, what am I doing? Am I perpetuating that? Because slave labor wouldn't exist if there wasn't the customer base. So, you know, if you can take yourself out of that, I'm not suggesting that you're all wearing things made by, you know, child slaves or things like that, but it is something to think about. And I just want to tell you all that we're really lucky. We had Noki come to the minute this blooming lockdown's over, we were desperate for him to come back. Noki does lots of lecturing around the country, so he spends a lot of time with young creatives, and when he came to ours, the most wonderful moment, and there's, you know, you have a moment in your life that you know you're always going to remember, and you were in that you were teaching them in Brighton, you were in the downstairs studio, and I came down just to kind of, it was probably about half an hour before the end of your first day workshop, and I just wanted to come down, and I heard him reading to the children, and they were so engaged, and it was so what was needed. And so not what people, people join to do a workshop, whether they want an artifact at the end, whatever it is, but this was just so rich, and just the way they were with you is just fantastic. I've got one last question for you, right? And this is, I think it brings us back to quite a lot you've been saying, and it says this. So this is by Sonny, and he's 16. I've been out. Yeah, I know. I've been out of school since I was 12. I was used by a gang in county lines, and I really want to get into sustainable street fashion, selling classic labels, classic trainers, and starting my own label. How do I start? So this is a lad who has been out of school. You know, you can see he has an entrepreneur spirit there. It's
also engaged in the brand as sportswear, but worn like the campaigns try to emulate. If you're part of the County Lines crews,
well, yeah,
tough time,
yeah.
tough environment, but you've been in them, you've understood them, you've been part of them. It's not fake for you.
You learned about economics, that's for sure. If you're, sent off dealing drugs here, there, and everywhere,
yeah, you understand it more than most art directors would even imagine in Nike and Adidas. I would suggest you look into the mashup and the customization and creating your own street apparel, because for you to take the mashup, which you have actually lived, like I did, I think you've lived it maybe even worse than I did, with worse oppression and seeing things you wish you had never seen, but you can't undo and unsee. Cutting up the brand and making new versions of it where you can actually physically smash up Nike, Adidas, and Fila and make one tracksuit top. I think you've probably got a better perspective as a young than I have.
Yeah, no, I think they have a very.
And if you convince your crew, your gang members, or the people you know run about you to enjoy wearing it, you've got a brilliant place to be given a journalist's moment for truth and understanding about why you want to, readdress the kind of negative environment that you were once in.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that there's quite a lot of others, like, for example, there's a brand called Keiko. That's K-K-E-I-K-O. It means blessings. And lad, I don't know how old he is, but he had a very similar story to Sonny, and he started up his own label, doing his own streetwear. And because he's hit that point so astutely, he is now a really coveted brand by young lads who are in his position. So because it's that work.
The time is now. I mean, they've got to remember, the brand did not invent rave and street. The human being, the youth of the early rave, creatives put the brand in the rave. They didn't create the rave, we put it in the rave. Okay, so we own ourselves, we own, and I think the time is now, definitely the time is now to become the new Nike, the new Adidas, the new Fila. Because sportswear has become part of fashion apparel. The zip is the new button, the draped shoulder in the track, the new epaulette, it's the trainer is the new shoe.
Sorry, and this lad who has done Keiko, I think his name's Donny, and he does mentoring as well. So I think that's what's so great, they're actually giving, but they understand where they came from. They understand better than any psychologist or whatever exactly how vulnerable children are.
I'm really excited, Caroline, to know that he's going to obviously be printing Keiko on T-shirts and bits, and his crew will be wearing his brand. It's much more healthy. That's much more healthy use of body billboard. And and I call it the BB, the body billboard. So it's kind of like what we are a billboard, but we put a brand on it, we become their walking billboard. You know what I mean? Exactly the same as when you open a magazine, exactly the same as when you see it fly past on a bus. These are all billboards. So we're the walking billboard. We're the human billboard. So, which I call the body billboard. So it's lovely to hear that a new brand is evolving, which is about a young person's endeavor, not a businessman's endeavor.
Yeah, no, I think
You know,
it's
it's just refreshing. It's just very refreshing.
Oh, lovely. Well, that's kind of it. Thank you so much. We've taken up so much of your time. And just to say, check out Noki, check out all the things that he's been talking about. You know, understand, you know, the rave scene, what's the modern comparison, if there is one. Think about, you know, growing, being in Shoreditch in those early years, looking at what Fashionista does for fashion, because a lot of you probably haven't heard of it. And also, you know, there's been quite a few things. Oh, and also just listen to what you've told them about their, you know, sort of like taking responsibility for their own behaviour. I think,
yeah, I think I took responsibility for my anger and I took it out on the brand.
Yeah.
So, and that's created a 25-year endeavor that has been copied by high fashion brands and artists. So, and I'm still struggling, but at the same time, I know that my tantrum, my bad behavior was diverted into a creative endeavor that has spawned other creatives to be inspired by my tantrum, not embarrassed by my tantrum. Because ultimately, you know, when you smash up your bedroom, you've got to tidy it up, you know, and you've got to be like, oh, why did I do that? Oh no, I've just broken this. I've just broken that. Oh my God. I've got to go and apologize to mum and dad when I really don't want to do that. You know what I mean? And all this stuff. So it's like, you know, you've got to like rewind. Nothing worse than having to rewind and force yourself to be humble, you know. It's much better to be humble before the tantrum and do it in advance of the tantrum.
Absolutely. Wise words as ever. Well, thank you so much. And if you want to find out more about Noki, you know, he's on Instagram, Dr. Noki. Look him up on the internet. You'll find lots of information about him. His really interesting history. We could only squeeze in a tiny bit. But thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you to you as well, Dr. Noki, of course.